Greg Taylor with Winona Radio, and today I've got the pleasure to talk with Chris Barden, who is the Republican candidate for Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Well, pleased to be here, and perhaps I should say Dr. Barden, because I guess you're a doctor. We were just talking about that off air.
Yes,
Not only an attorney, but have a doctorate as well. And Chris, we were also talking. Is this your first foray into public office?
I've never held any public office before. Yes, sir.
And so, what kind of made you think this would be the time was right to run for Attorney General?
Well, I'm still a licensed healthcare professional as well as a lawyer, and I've dealt with healthcare policy issues. I've published in medical journals, and so when the Obamacare law was making its way through, people started calling me. They were very concerned about how this would damage Minnesota healthcare, because we have one of the best healthcare systems in the whole world here in Minnesota. So to try to kind of dumb that down and nationalize it would be very traumatic for us. And so they began to call me and they asked me to think about running, and I began to investigate the office of Attorney General, and we've had a lot of trouble in that office over the last few years, a lot of scandals, a lot of turmoil, and then I discovered that it hadn't changed hands for 40 years. It's been held by the DFL for 40 continuous years, and I think that we all understand that our system is cleansed and renewed by transitions of power, and 40 years is way too long. So for all those issues, and then of course we had trouble with the election in 2008, and the office of Attorney General is the most important person in terms of protecting election integrity in our state. That office is responsible for making sure that the laws are faithfully followed in terms of elections. And so for all of those reasons, I decided that I would run.
All right. Well, and what you mentioned Obamacare was kind of maybe the stimulus that got you decided to run for Attorney General of the state. What do you see as some of the other key issues if you would win this fall?
You bet. I mean, I think stopping Obamacare and challenging that is clearly one of the major ones, and it's really why people have lost trust in government. I mean, if you look at, there's basic and essential rules of good government. One is fiscal responsibility, that is, stop spending money that we don't have and stop burdening us with debt. Number two would be open and transparent legislative process. Don't pass laws behind closed doors, and don't use legislative kickbacks, and don't pass laws that you haven't even read. And then thirdly, laws should be within the limits of the Constitution, and Obamacare violates all three of those major laws. I mean, we know that it's going to cost trillions of new dollars of debt. We know that it was passed with closed-door deals, legislative kickbacks, and people hadn't even read it before they voted for it. And then we know it violates the Constitution in major ways. So the job of the Attorney General is to defend the state of Minnesota against just these kinds of laws, and the incumbent has refused to do that. She's actually on record as being very much for Obamacare. So that's one major thing. Another thing is election integrity. In 2005, there was a national board that came up with a number of recommendations for states to make their elections clean and fair. And a key component of that is photo ID. You got to show a photo ID to rent a movie. Why shouldn't you show a photo ID to vote? So I think that's very important. Once again, the current incumbent Attorney General does not support photo ID. I do support photo ID. And making our elections clean and fair. Another one is business climate. Our current incumbent is viewed as being hostile to business, and I'd like to be fair to everyone. I'd like to represent the poor and the needy, and also people who take the chance to build a business to give us some jobs. And so I'd like to bring integrity back to that office. They've had a lot of scandals in that office. A large number of the lawyers have quit or been fired in the last few years. And so after 40 years with one party in charge, I think it's time for a change.
Well, we're talking today with Chris Barden, the Republican candidate for Minnesota Attorney General. And Chris, we appreciate talking to you. Briefly, maybe tell people a little bit about your background.
Yes, I grew up in Minnesota, went to the University of Minnesota, PhD from the University of Minnesota, taught in universities and a medical school, worked in hospitals. And then I became interested in healthcare policy questions. I went to Harvard Law School and then came back to Minnesota, and I've done litigation in many states, both at home and around the nation. And so I think this is the next phase for us is to get back in that office, to get into the office of Attorney General and actually make it work the way it should for all the people of the state.
Well, we appreciate talking with Chris Barden today, Attorney General candidate for the Republican Party. And make sure you go out and vote.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chris.